Karoline Leavitt had a full-on meltdown after Jasmine Crockett completely dismantled Donald Trump. And what triggered her? Jasmine told the truth. What followed was a fiery speech, a history lesson, and a reality check rolled into one, and it all started with Juneteenth, trans rights, and a brutal call-out aimed straight at the White House. Let's take a look at it.
So in a campaign where we talked about trans folk like ad nauseum, right? I just wanted to be clear that the harm that people are feeling every single day that is not caused by trans people, is caused by the person sitting in the White House.
Yeah.
So before we get into everything today, we're celebrating Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Tell me about Juneteenth.
Listen, now I'm a Texan.
Yes, you are.
So I feel like the rest of the country is just now kind of getting tuned in.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that being a Black woman, and for those that don't understand Juneteenth, this was about the fact that the last slaves down in Texas finally 2 years later realized that, or were made aware that they were no longer enslaved people. But in this time, though, especially with the anti-DEI movement and the rollback just of our civil rights and our civil liberties as a whole, as well as ignoring the Constitution, and there's so many rights that Black folk got specifically just from the Constitution, I think that this Juneteenth, everyone, whether you're Black or otherwise, should really evaluate what does freedom look like in this country? And are we willing to fight for it? And I think, you know, evaluating what happened at No Kings, I think we are ready and willing to fight for our freedom. But I think that it is important that we come together and we define what freedom looks like for those of us in this country, not just Black folk.
That's right. Yeah.
So let's get this straight. Jasmine Crockett just dropped a truth grenade on national TV and somehow managed to do it with grace and fire. While Republicans are out here acting like drag queens and diversity are the biggest threats to America, Crockett reminds us who's really doing the damage. Spoiler alert, he's orange, he's loud, and he lives at Mar-a-Lago. And let's not gloss over it. Juneteenth isn't just a holiday, it's a mirror, one that shows how far we haven't come. And up next, a truth bomb about the No Kings demonstration.
Do you think that No Kings demonstration is going to do something?
I hope so. I think that it's good to be in community. Right now, a lot of people are like, what can I do? And I feel helpless and that kind of stuff. But literally to show up and to see that there's so many like-minded people, as soon as you get off of X, you can find, you know, like-minded people, right? And so, like, seeing them in person and being in community and having the opportunity, I mean, it's astounding. It makes you say, you know what, I'm not crazy, okay? Like,
and I'm not alone.
Exactly. And
Whoopi says that all the time. We're not alone, and that proves it.
It does. It really does.
Crockett just gave us the perfect reminder. When it feels like the country's on fire and democracy's wearing a MAGA hat, showing up matters. The No Kings protest wasn't just a vibe. It was a full-on rebuke of the monarchy mindset Trump thinks he's entitled to. And she's right. Standing in that crowd, surrounded by people who aren't brainwashed by Fox News, reminds you, you're not crazy. You're not alone. You're just living in a country temporarily hijacked by a wannabe dictator in a red tie. And coming up, Jasmine absolutely obliterates Trump. And it's beautiful.
Anyway, in recent months, Trump has called you, quote, a low IQ person and a lowlife. Do you take that as a sign that you're doing something right?
I hope he also calls her a lawyer. That's another thing that she is.
No, he did not. He did not.
You know, he's good at projecting, is what I'll say to that. But, you know, I can't imagine being the president of the United States with everything that's going on in the world and worried about a sophomore in the House.
Well, you're a powerhouse, darling. Don't minimize.
Still, he the president of the United States, right? So it talks about like his level of petty, number one, and it also just kind of goes to the fact that like he's not focused on the things that he needs to focus on. Listen, you're the president, I'm over in the House, and I'm trying to get these House members to do right by their constituents, which means going against you. But you're taking out your time when people are literally struggling. You said on day one you were going to reduce the price of eggs. We ain't heard nothing about it. You know, you said that you were going to stop all the wars in the world, and it seems like, you know, you go in the opposite direction. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's real issues and there's people that are hurting, and then you had this random sidekick who decided that he was going to cut off the aid to everybody. And then you're losing in court every single day. You know, talk about, listen, call him the biggest loser because like the courts, the courts are handing him some losses. So I'm just like, can you get your stuff in order? Like, can you focus? But no.
Jasmine Crockett hit the nail straight through the orange spray tan. Trump isn't just out of touch, he's delusional. If you're cheering for a deportation plan built on cruelty, one that rips apart families, targets hardworking immigrants, and spits on the very idea of liberty and dignity, then yeah, you might want to do a little soul searching. Supporting Trump at this point, it's not just political, it's deranged. This isn't about policy, it's about feeding a cult that runs on fear, lies, and Fox News. And Karoline Leavitt, oh, she's drinking that MAGA Kool-Aid like it's bottomless. Now let's watch her meltdown against Jasmine in real time.
Really quick on Jasmine Crockett, she said, I believe, that Trump supporters are mentally ill before calling for bipartisan support against the president. Can you respond to that, especially considering she's a rising star in the Democrat Party right now?
She is a rising star. It's quite something to behold, actually. I hope that she continues to be a rising star for the Republican Party, at least. I think it's incredibly derogatory to accuse nearly 80 million Americans of mental illness. The last time I checked, Jasmine Crockett couldn't dream of winning such a majority of the public as President Trump did. And the America First movement, which President Trump has built, is filled of hardworking patriots, the forgotten men and women, business owners, law enforcement officers, nurses and teachers, and middle America, as we all know, you know, from where you all grew up, outside of this beltway. That's who makes up this president's movement. And Jasmine Crockett should go to a Trump rally sometime and she can see it for herself.
Here comes Karoline Leavitt, polishing her best fake outrage and reaching for the world's tiniest violin. She calls Jasmine Crockett a rising star, and you can tell it hurts. Then she tries the usual MAGA move. How dare you insult 80 million people? Girl, 80 million? That's a generous estimate. Considering how many ghost voters, convicted felons, and imaginary coal miners exist in Trump's fanfiction America. Leavitt's big defense? That the Trump movement is made of hardworking patriots. And then she just reads off a Walmart name tag. Nurses, cops, small business owners, law-abiding folks. Yeah, except the ones storming the Capitol in tactical gear. She says Jasmine should go to a Trump rally. Please, Crockett's got better things to do than visit a delusional cosplay cult screaming "lock her up" at clouds. And here's the real irony. Republicans love to pretend they're the ones being looked down on, but they've spent years trashing every major American city like it's their kink. New York, LA, Chicago, trash according to Magaland. But let's be honest, it's the blue states funding your roads, schools, and yes, your SNAP benefits. And guess what? Trump is cutting those benefits now, just like Jasmine Crockett warned. And oh, you're gonna want to see what she says next.
Like at the end of the day, would you rather have a tax bill that may be $5, you know, less that you're normally keeping in your pockets, but you don't have this crazy random healthcare bill?
Right.
Probably so, right? Like, and the reality is that people are gonna die. You know, listening to the stories of people that literally have only been able to live because of Medicaid, it's heartbreaking. And the fact that we're talking about rich people just keeping more money in their pockets while literally other people are going to die, it sounds anti-American and definitely sounds anti-patriotic.
So one of the things that generally when I've covered big bills in domestic policy in DC, you know, there's this idea of like the Senate is like the cooling saucer, and that, you know, and that usually things come back from the Senate like more moderate, but both on the left and the right. That is generally the way things go. It seems to me like Ron Johnson and the sort of right-wing faction in the Senate is actually pushing to make this bill more aggressive on the cuts side. And I'm wondering if you were anticipating that, or if you thought you were expecting a more moderate bill.
No, I was expecting the Senate to fix everything. I mean, I was expecting it still to come back as a bad bill, but we're talking about
it would get better.
Correct. I thought it would get better. We're talking about a bill that only made it through the House by one vote.
Right.
One vote. So literally it's like two people went AWOL, right? And another two Republicans voted with the Dems, and then another one just said, listen, I'm just going to white light this or, you know, vote present.
Yeah.
And so I expected in the Senate, especially because think about it this way. Our congressional districts are approximately 766,000 people. And so literally there are some Republicans that don't have any hospitals whatsoever in their districts. But then you start talking about the Senate, every single state senator has hospitals hospitals. And when you start to talk about rural hospitals possibly shutting down because they don't have enough funding, because you're now cutting this Medicaid funding and they can't supplement because they don't have all these other people coming in with, say, private insurance, I thought that the senators would say, listen, we can't do this.
Jasmine Crockett just laid out the cold, brutal truth. Republicans are trading people's lives for a few bucks in tax cuts for the rich. Imagine being so deep in donor bootlicking mode that you'd rather let rural hospitals shut down than admit Medicaid actually saves lives. And the kicker? Even the Senate, supposedly the cooling saucer of Congress, is now just a microwave for cruelty. Instead of fixing the bill, Ron Johnson and friends are out here making it worse. Coming up next, Jasmine gets hit with a very interesting question. You want to hear it.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that, because one of the things, my understanding, again, the details here get a little complicated, but there's this mechanism called the provider tax, which actually would hurt hospitals.
Yeah.
Let's sort of do the short version that way. They're trying to squeeze more revenue. My feeling always, when I used to cover Congress day in, day out, was that the hospitals were big interest groups.
They are.
They will drop money on your head if they don't like it. They will be up in your office.
Yes.
Where are the hospitals? Honestly, it's wild to me that they have not shown up in a big way.
I don't know.
To fight this bill.
I have no idea. I mean, it's kind of like you saw the farmers, right? Like when we were going through that, like, continuing resolution, the farmers were like, wait a minute. Like, they showed up, like the Farm Bureau was like, we are here, right? And so it is odd because the hospital lobby is a really big lobby. And a lot of people probably think of lobbies and they think, oh, you're going to be the antithesis of me. But when you're talking about rural America, like, I lived in East Texas. Let me tell you, hospitals are shutting down. And in rural America, you don't have as many providers either. And so literally, if you have this specialized cancer, you can't stay at home. You've got to go somewhere else because there's no one that knows about the help that you need. So it is really odd. And I tell you this, that there's going to be more hurt that comes to red states than blue states. Blue states can actually take in a lot of this, not to say that they should and not to say that it's right, but like it will be
disproportionately red states will get hurt by the Medicaid cuts in both these versions of the bill.
So just to recap, Jasmine Crockett is out here spelling out exactly how this bill obliterates rural health care. And somehow the hospital lobby is taking a nap? We've seen farmers march into Congress with pitchfork-level urgency when their funding was on the line. But the hospital lobby? Crickets. Meanwhile, East Texas hospitals are closing down. Cancer patients in rural towns are being forced to drive hours just to see a specialist, if they can even find one. And who gets hit the hardest? The very red states MAGA Republicans love to shout about, while quietly cutting the programs that keep their voters alive. Let's be clear, this bill doesn't just trim the fat, it slams a wrecking ball into the healthcare safety net. And somehow Republicans are out here celebrating like it's a win. Jasmine's right, blue states will manage. Red states, they might bleed. So yeah, if this kind of wild, unhinged policymaking blows your mind the way it blows up rural hospitals, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss what's next. And speaking of that, what we found in the next Trump story, let's just say you're not ready for it.